I think I'm getting sick, I told my daughter. Could you stay with me for a few days? I coughed, moving slowly, hoping she'd care enough to notice. The next day, she left a bag of takeout on my doorstep and texted, "I'm busy." I smiled, went back inside, and made sure she'd never ignore me again. The cough started on a Tuesday morning, deep and rattling in my chest like autumn leaves caught in a storm drain. I stood at my kitchen window watching the neighbor's dog scratch at something in the dirt and felt the familiar ache settle into my bones, not just from whatever virus had found me, but from the hollow certainty that I would weather this alone. Don't forget to subscribe to the channel and comment where you're watching from. At 62, I had grown accustomed to solitude, but illness has a way of stripping away the comfortable lies we tell ourselves about independence. The fever arrived that evening, and with it a vulnerability I hadn't felt since Ansel died 3 years ago. My hands shook as I reached for the phone. "I think I'm getting sick," I told Bella. When she finally answered on the fourth ring, my voice came out smaller than I intended, cracked around the edges. "Could you stay with me for a few days?" The pause stretched long enough for me to hear her television in the background, some reality show with people screaming at each other. "How fitting, Mom. I'm really swamped at work right now," she said, and I could picture her already mentally cataloging the inconvenience of my request. "Maybe take some Dayquil and rest up. You'll be fine." I moved slowly through my small house that night, each step deliberate. Exaggerated part of me hoped she might call back, having remembered some maternal instinct buried beneath her busy schedule. The other part, the part that had been growing stronger and more cynical with each passing disappointment, knew better. The next morning brought a bag of Thai takeout on my doorstep and a text message. "Busy today, feel better soon." No call, no check-in, just dismissal wrapped in the thinnest veneer of concern. I stared at the plastic containers through my fever-hazed pad thai growing cold in the October air, and something fundamental shifted inside me, not the sharp crack of a breaking heart I had weathered those storms years ago, but something deeper and more final, like a foundation, settling, accepting that the weight it had been carrying was never meant to be borne alone. For 3 days, I drifted through my illness in solitude. I made my own soup, checked my own temperature, and listened to my own labored breathing echo in rooms that suddenly felt too large and too empty, but instead of self-pity, I found myself taking inventory. When had I become so expendable? The answer came in fragments, like remembering a dream: years of making myself smaller to accommodate Bella's growing resentment after her father's death, months of swallowing my own needs when she complained about her job, her marriage, her children, who barely acknowledged my existence, decades of being the reliable constant, while everyone else moved forward with their lives taking my presence for granted, like electricity or running water. By Friday, my fever had broken, but something else had crystallized in its place. I sat at my kitchen table with a cup of tea growing cold between my palms, and made a decision that would have terrified me a week earlier. I was going to disappear, not dramatically. That wasn't my style. No angry confrontations or tear-soaked ultimatums, just a quiet, deliberate withdrawal from a life that had apparently been functioning perfectly well without my active participation. The rural property had been sitting empty since Ansel's mother passed 5 years ago, 40 acres of rolling hills and oak trees an hour outside the city, with a small farmhouse that needed work but had good bones. Bella had always dismissed it as that old place too far from civilization to be practical perfect. I spent the weekend researching moving companies and storage units. My energy returning with each decision. There was something intoxicating about planning in secret, about reclaiming agency over my own life without requiring anyone's permission or approval. Monday morning, I called a real estate agent about renting out my house. By Tuesday, I had hired cleaners and contractors. By Wednesday, the moving truck was scheduled. "Where are you going?" My neighbor, Mrs. Catherine, asked when she saw the boxes piling up on my porch somewhere I can breathe. I told her, and realized it was the most honest thing I'd said in months. I didn't tell Bella, didn't call my sister in Phoenix or my handful of remaining friends. This metamorphosis required solitude, the kind of deep quiet that only comes when you stop performing for an audience that isn't really watching anyway. The farmhouse smelled like dust and memories when I first walked through it with my suitcases. The floors creaked, the windows stuck, and the kitchen hadn't been updated since the 1970s, but sunlight streamed through the front windows in golden rectangles, and I could hear birds instead of traffic. For the first time in years, I smiled without forcing it. That first night, I sat on the front porch with a glass of wine and my laptop, researching online courses, digital marketing, web design, social media management. Skills that had seemed impossibly foreign just weeks ago now felt like doorways to a future I could build entirely on my own terms. The silence of my phone was no longer painful but purposeful. Every hour that passed without a call or text from Bella was another hour I could invest in becoming someone new, someone who didn't wait by the phone or make excuses for other people's cruelty disguised as busyness. I enrolled in 3 courses that night. My credit card information typed with steady fingers, the woman who had begged for scraps of attention was evolving into someone who generated her own worth. By the end of the first week, I had established a routine that felt both foreign and essential. Morning coffee on the porch, watching deer move through the oak trees, hours spent learning about conversion rates and content strategies. My mind absorbing information with a hunger I hadn't felt since college. Afternoon walks along the property lines, my body growing stronger with each passing day. The evenings were for planning. I drafted business proposals and designed mock websites, teaching myself skills that would have seemed impossible a month ago, But isolation, I discovered, was an excellent teacher. Without the constant interruption of other people's needs and expectations, I could focus entirely on my own potential. 3 weeks into my new life, my phone finally rang. Bella's name appeared on the screen, and I stared at it for several rings before answering. "Mom, where are you?" "I went by your house and there's a for rent sign in the yard." Her voice carried an edge of panic that might have softened me once upon a time. Now it simply sounded like someone finally noticing that the foundation had shifted. "I moved," I said. "Simply moved where?"